My wife said she was going on a spiritual retreat. I tracked her. She was at a motel with my brother. I called the room, put it on speakerphone at her birthday party. 120 guests heard everything. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. My full and real name is Rodrigo Enrique Almeida. I'm 42 years old with an existence marked by dusty construction sites under scorching sun, complex structural projects obsessively reviewed during lonely dawns illuminated only by the blue light of a computer monitor, and a 15-year marriage that I discovered far too late was merely a meticulously rehearsed theater starring a wife who transformed sacred vows into a cruel joke while secretly, systematically, brazenly sharing a bed with my own younger brother for entire months, right under my naive and trusting nose. I'm a civil engineer, construction supervisor responsible for coordinating teams of 50 to 80 employees, simultaneously on medium-sized residential and commercial projects, dealing daily with tight deadlines, impossible to meet without sacrificing weekends and holidays, suppliers delaying critical deliveries, compromising entire schedules, surprise inspections from regulatory agencies looking for minimal irregularities to apply astronomical fines, and constant pressure from anxious investors wanting immediate financial returns while ignoring the inevitable technical complexities of quality civil construction. 15 absolutely dedicated, committed, and apparently happy years. I was married to Helena Cristina Martinez Almeida, a successful clinical nutritionist who managed her own profitable practice serving demanding upper-middle-class clientele, obsessed with trendy restrictive diets and expensive supplementation, promising instant, miraculous bodily transformations that were biologically impossible. The devastating, humiliating, transformative story I'm about to narrate now with every painful detail permanently engraved in traumatized neural circuits began on an apparently ordinary routine Thursday in September when Helena casually announced during a hurried breakfast that she would participate in a 3-day spiritual retreat organized by a group of friends from the club she religiously attended for Pilates classes and gossip sessions disguised as female gatherings, leaving Friday morning and returning Sunday night, spiritually renewed and ready for the following week of endless nutritional consultations. Love, I need this time for myself. You know how busy the office has been. Patients calling after hours, desperate because they ate 2 slices of pizza instead of 1. I need to disconnect, meditate, reconnect with my spiritual essence away from technology and stressful daily obligations. She explained with that convincing tone professionally practiced that she used with clients resistant to drastic dietary changes, absent-mindedly stirring expensive organic natural yogurt mixed with artisanal granola while I quickly devoured French bread with butter, before rushing out for an urgent morning meeting at a problematic construction site. I was too tired, mentally exhausted from a particularly brutal week coordinating 3 projects simultaneously in different critical phases to question or suspect anything beyond the face value of her words, my brain already mentally elaborating an endless list of urgent tasks awaiting immediate attention at the office and construction sites scattered throughout the city. I trusted completely, naively, stupidly, because she was my wife of 15 years, the potential mother of the children we planned to eventually have when careers allowed us to financially breathe. A person who supposedly knew every physical and emotional scar accumulated during decades of shared life. Of course, love, you deserve this self-care time. You work too much, and I've been emotionally absent because of these infernal projects that never seem to finish on time promised to clients. I replied distractedly, already mentally reviewing structural plans that needed urgent approval from an impossibly perfectionist client. What I didn't know, didn't suspect, couldn't imagine in the most disturbing nightmares was that the supposed spiritual retreat of inner reconnection was an elaborate, cowardly, cruelly calculated lie to cover up an extended weekend of unbridled sex in a roadside motel with my brother Daniel, a divorced real estate agent who regularly visited our house for Sunday family lunches, birthday barbecues, end-of-year parties, always hugging Helena too warmly, holding her waist excessively long when posing for family photographs, making ambiguous comments about her physical appearance that I naively interpreted as harmless fraternal compliments instead of blatant flirtations happening wide open before my eyes blinded by misplaced trust. The suspicion began germinating. Tiny, almost imperceptible on Thursday afternoon when I arrived home unexpectedly early because a site meeting was abruptly cancelled by a concrete supplier who broke essential equipment, delaying the entire schedule by 2 financially disastrous weeks. Helena was in the bedroom, talking on the phone with the door ajar, conspiratorial whispering low voice, completely different from the usual professional tone she used with patients, or the animated one she used with club friends, discussing I approached silently down the hallway, with no intention of spying, but simply because I was walking barefoot on cold porcelain flooring, fragments of a conversation leaking through the narrow opening of the door. I can't stand pretending anymore. Love, Friday never comes. I'm crazy to feel you inside me again. That last time in the parking lot was too quick. I want enough time to explore every inch of your body without rushes or risks of being suddenly discovered. My heart froze instantly as if liquid nitrogen had been pumped through my veins, blood turning into ice, burning painfully, stomach churning violently nauseated, while my brain desperately tried to process, rationalize, deny the obvious meaning of the words accidentally overheard. I silently retreated down the hallway, stumbling like a disoriented drunk. Hands shaking uncontrollably, cold sweat instantly sprouting on my forehead and back, soaking my work dress shirt, mind spinning frantically through possibilities. Perhaps I was hearing her patient's conversation on speakerphone discussing their own extramarital relationship. Perhaps it was a call from a friend confiding a secret affair. Perhaps my ears were playing cruel tricks, distorting innocent words into sinister meanings fed by unjustified paranoia born from accumulated stress of suffocating work. I sat heavily on the living room sofa, trying to control irregular accelerated breathing from panic attack, beginning to manifest alarming physical symptoms. Heart hammering violently against ribs like a desperate prisoner trying to escape a cell. Peripheral vision progressively darkening into a tunnel narrowing dangerously. Helena emerged from the bedroom eternal minutes later, with a perfectly serene expression. Composed, practiced smile fixed on her light pink painted lips. No visible trace of guilt or nervousness, betraying the supposed explicit sexual conversation I would swear I had heard minutes ago. Love, I didn't know you'd come back early. Are you okay? You look pale. Are you feeling sick, or is it just accumulated fatigue from these hellish weeks of excessive work? She asked, with seemingly genuine concern, sitting beside me on the beige leather sofa. Cold hand, touching my forehead, checking temperature like an experienced nurse examining a feverish patient. I opened my mouth, trying to formulate a direct question, honest confrontation, about the suspicious phone conversation accidentally overheard, but words died in my throat, closed by paralyzing fear of devastating confirmation that would completely destroy comfortable, known reality, transforming stable existence into terrifying, incomprehensible chaos. Just tired, really. Meeting cancelled last minute. Problems with supplier delaying schedule again. Investor pressure increasing proportionally to accumulated delays. I lied cowardly, pathetically, choosing temporary ignorance instead of potentially annihilating truth, pushing uncomfortable suspicions into a mental compartment firmly locked with a protective denial padlock. But the tiny seed of doubt had been deeply planted in fertile soil of systematically ignored masculine intuition during months, or perhaps entire years, germinating rapidly, growing vigorously, fed by retrospective observations, suddenly gaining sinister meanings previously invisible. Helena's increasingly frequent absences claiming house calls with demanding VIP patients, late returns from supposed meetings with nutritional supplement suppliers, progressively declining sexual interest over the past year attributed by me, naively, to mutual professional stress and natural fatigue of a long-term relationship, losing exciting initial novelty. That night, lying awake in the marital bed while Helena slept peacefully beside me, breathing softly without showing any sign of guilty conscience, disturbing peaceful sleep, I made a crucial decision that would irreversibly change the trajectory of my entire future existence. I would discreetly, methodically, conclusively investigate my growing suspicions before confronting potentially unfounded accusations, based on unjustified paranoia unnecessarily destroying a solid marriage. The following morning, Friday, when Helena cheerfully departed for a supposed 3-day spiritual retreat driving, her silver compact car loaded with a small travel suitcase and large yoga bag never before seen in our home. I waited only 30 minutes before calling Mauricio, my best friend since engineering college days, where we survived impossible differential calculus tests together, sleepless nights studying for dreaded final exams, emotional graduations celebrated with cheap beers, and youthful promises of eternal friendship. Mom, I need a huge favor, and you'll think I'm going completely insane or developing pathological paranoia, but I swear I have concrete reasons to suspect that. Helena is cheating on me, and I need to confirm before confronting and potentially destroying a marriage. Based on a ridiculous misunderstanding, I blurted out rapidly as soon as he answered the phone with the hoarse's voice of someone who had just woken up, despite it already being almost 10 o'clock on a weekday morning. Mauricio was a systems analyst working remotely with self-managed flexible hours that frequently meant sleeping late to compensate for late nights programming complex codes fueled by industrial quantities of strong black coffee and greasy processed snacks. Rodrigo, man, breathe deeply and tell me everything from the chronological beginning, because you're not the type of person who develops unfounded jealousy without substantial motivating evidence. He responded, already completely awake. In the serious professional tone he used in important virtual meetings with international hierarchical superiors, I narrated in detail the phone conversation accidentally overheard the previous afternoon, explicit words still disturbingly echoing in my tormented memory. Suspicions retrospectively accumulated about Helena's progressively distant behavior during recent months. Heavy silence filled the phone line for long, uncomfortable seconds before Mauricio sighed deeply, audible through the cell phone pressed against my anxious ear, awaiting the verdict of a trusted friend. Look, Rodrigo, as your best friend for over 20 years, I need to be brutally honest, even at the risk of you getting temporarily pissed at me. I've noticed for months that Helena acts strangely when we're all together at barbecues or parties, always glued to her phone, smiling at secret messages, frequently disappearing to take private calls in isolated locations, exchanging strange prolonged glances with someone I could never precisely identify. I didn't want to feed unfounded suspicions or cause unnecessary problems in your marriage based on vague, subjective impressions. But now that you yourself are suspicious, I think it's worth investigating professionally instead of suffering in corrosive uncertainty or confronting prematurely without irrefutable, concrete evidence. His words painfully confirmed intuitions I had been systematically suppressing. Validated fears I classified as unjustified paranoia. Authorized an investigation that part of me still morally resisted, considering a violation of privacy and marital trust. I know a discreet, professional, private investigator, a former colleague from a previous company who specialized in marital infidelity cases after his own traumatic divorce, discovering his ex-wife's betrayal through a hired detective. The type of person who understands the pain of not knowing and the need for conclusive truth, even if potentially devastating. Mauricio continued, already assuming the role of practical organizer of the necessary investigative operation. I'll call him right now. Briefly explain this situation. See if he can start surveillance, immediately taking advantage of the fact that Helena is supposedly at a spiritual retreat for the next 3 days, providing a perfect window of opportunity for undetectable, discreet monitoring. 2 hours later, I was sitting uncomfortably in a small, busy cafe downtown meeting Investigator Claudio Ferreira in person, a 49-year-old man with residual military posture from decades serving in the police before early retirement. Cold, gray eyes of a professional who documented hundreds of marital betrayals through telephoto lenses, capturing intimate moments stolen in cheap motels, dark parking lots, secret apartments rented specifically for clandestine encounters. Mr. Rodrigo, I've been working in this field for 6 years since I discovered through an investigator colleague that my own wife of 22 years was systematically cheating on me with her Jim's personal trainer for 3 entire years, while I worked night shifts, protecting citizens that ironically included the 2 of them secretly meeting, patrolled dangerous streets. He began without unnecessary preambles, his deep voice marked by poorly healed emotional scars from his own painfully experienced betrayal. Claudio offered no false comforting hopes or minimized the seriousness of the situation, as some professionals do, trying to soften the emotional impact on already traumatized vulnerable clients, corroded by suspicions. Based on the description Mauricio preliminarily provided and the additional details you just narrated, the statistical probability of infidelity is approximately 85%, considering classic behavioral patterns that I have repeatedly observed in hundreds of similar cases. Elaborate lies about real whereabouts, secretive whispered phone conversations, unexplained declining conjugal sexual interest, increasing frequent absences with convenient professional justifications. He analyzed clinically like a doctor diagnosing a terminal disease based on symptoms presented by a patient denying obvious illness. I hired his services immediately, signing a simple contract stipulating daily fees plus operational expenses, including fuel for mobile surveillance, professional audio-visual recording equipment, occasional bribes necessary for establishment employees, providing privileged information about anonymously registered guests. I need you to provide all relevant information about Helena, her vehicle license plate, cell phone number, recent clear photographs of face and full body facilitating identification from a distance, places she regularly frequents, including office, gym, beauty salon, addresses of close friends who supposedly organized the fictitious spiritual retreat. Claudio methodically instructed, noting data in a professional notebook bound in black leather worn from intensive use. I provided everything requested, plus additional crucial information that I had deliberately omitted during my initial conversation with Mauricio, due to paralyzing shame, too painful to easily verbally. My main suspicion about the identity of Helena's supposed lover was my own younger brother, Daniel, a real estate broker divorced 4 years ago, who had always shown excessive inappropriate interest in my wife, superficially disguised as harmless fraternal admiration. Claudio showed no surprise or shock, as I expected from the devastating revelation of double family betrayal. He merely nodded understandingly, as if cases of infidelity between in-laws were statistically common in his professional portfolio. Family betrayals are surprisingly frequent, representing approximately 23% of cases I investigate annually, generally because family proximity provides repeated easy access to the potential victim without arousing suspicions of the confident spouse, interpreting interactions as normal family coexistence culturally expected. He explained educationally, like an experienced professor lecturing on predictable human patterns of betrayal, systematically observed. I felt violent nausea churning my empty stomach, imagining my own blood brother, a person I had known since his birth when I was only 5 years old, excited with the arrival of a new little brother, intimately touching, penetrating, making my wife of 15 years pleasurably moan in cheap motel rooms while I honestly, naively, stupidly worked at construction sites under the scorching sun, worried about delayed schedules and blown budgets. The marital betrayal would already be sufficiently devastating by itself, destroying trust and love patiently built during a decade and a half of relationship, but simultaneous family betrayal exponentially amplified the pain, adding layers of inevitable public humiliation when the truth eventually emerged to the knowledge of elderly parents, close relatives, mutual friends, shared during years of family coexistence. Claudio began surveillance immediately that same Friday afternoon, discreetly tracking Helena's vehicle through a miniaturized GPS device he magnetically installed under her chassis, taking advantage that the car was parked on a public street near the cafe where we met. Technically completely legal because it didn't violate private property nor invade the constitutionally protected interior of the vehicle. He called me just 3 hours later with a tense voice, loaded with confirmation that I desperately feared hearing but absolutely needed to validate. Questioned mental sanity. "Rodrigo, I regret to inform you, but your suspicions have been conclusively confirmed, and in the most painful way possible. Helena is not at a spiritual retreat, nor anywhere near any location that, remotely, resembles a meditation center or religious temple. She is currently registered at a roadside motel located 63 kilometers from the city, room number 27, accompanied by a man exactly matching the physical description you provided of your brother, Daniel, including a vehicle registered in his name parked discreetly 3 spaces away from hers, pathetically, uselessly trying to avoid the obvious association between both cars in case someone knew both vehicles. The world spun dizzily around like a crazy carousel out of control. vision blurring with involuntary tears that I desperately tried to suppress by blinking rapidly because men should not cry publicly in busy cafes full of curious strangers, observing discreetly, breathing becoming irregular, choppy, as if someone was physically compressing my chest with crushing force, preventing adequate pulmonary expansion. Are you absolutely, unquestionably certain that it's really my brother and not just someone with a similar coincidental appearance? I desperately asked, clinging to the irrational hope that perhaps there was an improbable but technically possible identification error. 100% certainty confirmed through photographs captured with a professional telephoto lens of 600mm focal length, allowing unequivocal facial identification without requiring dangerous approach alerting targets about ongoing surveillance. Claudio responded with professional certainty, eliminating any possibility of denial or protective rationalization. I hung up the phone with hands trembling so violently that I almost dropped the device on the cold floor of the now practically empty cafe, except for an elderly couple talking softly in a distant corner and a barista cleaning the espresso machine with repetitive mechanical movements. My mind spinning frantically, trying to process the devastating reality, just irrefutably confirmed. My wife of 15 years was at that exact moment, probably naked, sweaty, intimately intertwined with my own brother in a cheap motel room while I sat alone in a public establishment trying not to vomit from the overwhelming nausea violently churning my stomach. Mauricio arrived, running 17 minutes later, apparently having dropped everything he was remotely doing for the multinational company's computer upon hearing the desperate urgency in my voice when I called asking him to immediately meet me, because I was literally, psychologically crumbling, unable to safely drive home or anywhere else, with vision blurred by involuntary tears and hands trembling uncontrollably on an imaginary steering wheel. He found me sitting at the same cafe table now closing for lunch break, the establishment's owner graciously allowing us to remain a few more minutes after noticing my visibly concerning deteriorated emotional state. "Rodrigo, man, you look like a walking corpse. Face completely pale. Cold sweating despite the freezing air conditioning, breathing irregularly as if you were having an imminent heart attack," Mauricio said, sitting heavily in the opposite chair. His expression mixing genuine concern with something resembling growing anger as he processed confirmation of what he himself had vaguely suspected for months but never explicitly verbalized. "Claudio absolutely confirmed everything worst we could imagine, didn't he? Helena is really cheating on you, and specifically with Daniel as you horribly suspected?" I nodded mutely, unable to articulate words through a painfully closed throat, as if someone was squeezing with crushing force preventing adequate air passage. Tears shamefully running down my face, no longer caring who might observe, judging socially unacceptable masculine emotional weakness. Mauricio didn't offer empty, comforting platitudes or try to minimize the gravity of the situation with inappropriate forced optimism. He just sat in silent solidarity for long minutes, allowing me to process the traumatic shock at my own irregular pace, before eventually asking pragmatically, "What do you want to do now, immediately?" Directly confront her when she returned Sunday night, pretending to be spiritually renewed from the fictitious retreat. Show up at the motel, surprising them in the act, in real time. Consult a divorce attorney first, before any emotionally charged confrontation, potentially legally harmful. His question forced my shock-numbed brain to start functioning minimally rationally instead of just obsessively spinning in torturous loops of disturbing mental images of Helena and Daniel touching, kissing, making passionate love in cheap rooms, while I naively worked believing both genuinely loved me, respecting sacred family bonds. I don't know, Mo. Honestly, I can't think clearly about anything beyond the devastating double betrayal, simultaneously feeling like driving to that motel immediately, to violently confront both, despite never having been a physically aggressive person in my entire adult life, and the opposite desire to simply permanently disappear, avoiding the inevitable painful, humiliating confrontation. I honestly admitted, voice coming out hoarse and irregular, loaded with conflicting emotions tearing me apart internally. Mauricio sighed deeply, scratching his unshaven characteristic beard of someone who works remotely without concern for professional in-person appearance. Dark brown eyes protected by round gold-framed glasses showing compassion mixed with vicarious anger, directed at the absent traitors. "Look, as your best friend of 2 decades, I need to give pragmatic advice, even if it's not what you emotionally want to hear at this devastating moment. Don't do anything impulsive today that might compromise your future legal position in the inevitable divorce process or result in criminal charges of physical assault, property invasion, disturbing the peace that Daniel and Helena could strategically use against you, manipulating the narrative to appear as victims instead of cruel perpetrators. His words gradually penetrated through the dense emotional fog enveloping my capacity for logical reasoning, making frustrating, pragmatic sense despite the primitive visceral desire for immediate violent confrontation. Are you suggesting I simply do nothing? Pretend I don't know? Patiently wait for Helena to return Sunday night with elaborate lies about a wonderful spiritual retreat, while Daniel's smell still permeates her skin? I asked, with corrosive bitterness, tinging each word uttered with difficulty through a tensely clenched jaw. Not exactly. I'm not suggesting cowardly, passive inaction, but rather intelligent, calculated strategic action to maximize your legal and financial interests in the inevitable divorce instead of momentary emotional satisfaction from a dramatic public confrontation that could substantially harm you later. Mauricio explained patiently, didactically, like an experienced teacher instructing an emotionally disturbed student, incapable of adequately absorbing complex information. Let's consult a specialized attorney. Today, Saturday afternoon, if possible, to find someone available for emergencies. Get professional guidance on how to legally proceed protecting your property rights. Systematically document evidence through Claudio before alerting Helena and Daniel about the discovery exposing their behavior. Prepare a favorable divorce strategy before the inevitable confrontation. His logic was frustratingly irrefutable, although every cell in my body screamed for immediate justice. Humiliating public confrontation of the traitors, emotional vengeance, proportional to the devastating pain, cruelly inflicted. Do you know any competent family lawyers specialized in complex litigious divorces available for emergency consultation on a Saturday afternoon? I asked skeptically about the possibility of finding a qualified professional available outside traditional business hours during the weekend, when most people deservedly rested from exhausting weekly professional routines. Mauricio smiled slightly, the first remotely positive expression since his arrival at the depressing cafe. Pulling his cell phone from the pocket of worn jeans, stained with processed snack remnants obsessively consumed during nocturnal programming marathons. It so happens that yes, I know Dr. Vicente Al, a 53-year-old family lawyer, specialized in contentious divorces, with an impressive track record of victories in complex cases involving marital infidelity, concealment of assets, disputed child custody, when applicable. He's somewhat of an obsessive workaholic who rarely turns off his professional phone, even during weekends, because he genuinely loves his work and challenges healthy boundaries between personal and professional life. I'll call him right now to see if he can receive us today afternoon for an emergency consultation explaining the urgent gravity of the emotional and legal situation, while Mauricio dialed the apparently memorized number of a lawyer known professionally through networks cultivated over years working in the connected technology industry. My mind involuntarily wandered back to disturbing images of Helena and Daniel at the motel, obsessively imagining sordid details too intimate to contemplate comfortably but impossible to completely avoid. How did the forbidden affair between sister-in-law and brother-in-law begin, simultaneously violating marital trust and sacred fraternal bonds? How long had it been secretly happening, under my naive nose, blinded by misplaced love and trust? How many times had they met clandestinely in cheap motels, secret apartments, perhaps even in our own matrimonial home when I was absent, honestly working at distant construction sites, stupidly believing that both respected sacred vows and basic family loyalty? Helena's betrayal was sufficiently devastating by itself, completely destroying the foundation of 15 years of marriage supposedly built on mutual love, respect, lifelong commitment through the inevitable good and bad moments of any long-lasting relationship. But Daniel's simultaneous betrayal exponentially amplified the pain, adding layers of inevitable public family humiliation when the truth eventually emerged to the knowledge of elderly parents, who adored both sons equally, close relatives who attended regular family gatherings where Helena and Daniel interacted casually and naturally without raising obvious suspicions, mutual friends shared over years of festive social coexistence, celebrating birthdays, holidays, professional achievements collectively. How would I explain to my widowed 71-year-old mother, with a fragile heart after 2 previous heart attacks, that her two responsible adult sons had become sexually and romantically involved, destroying family through cruel, calculated double betrayal. How would I face Daniel at inevitable future family gatherings during parental birthdays, nephew graduations, cousin weddings, when I would eventually have to share the same physical space with the man who repeatedly penetrated my wife while simultaneously betraying basic fraternal loyalty expected between blood brothers sharing the same family upbringing and supposedly similar values? Rodrigo, Dr. Vicente can receive us in 2 hours at his office located in a commercial building near the central courthouse. He canceled a less urgent personal commitment when I briefly explained the gravity of the emotional situation and need for immediate legal guidance. Before a possible legally detrimental precipitated confrontation, Mauricio announced, interrupting the descending spiral of increasingly disturbing and unproductive obsessive torturous thoughts. I suggest using this intermediate time to go to my nearby apartment, take a shocking cold shower, waking up your numbed nervous system, change your current sweaty clothes for something more professionally presentable, eat something substantial even if your stomach is revolted because your body needs fuel to function minimally, during an important legal consultation that will determine future strategy and procedures. I silently agreed, following Mauricio, like an automatic zombie functioning on basic autopilot, to his compact car parked on a side street under the pleasant shade of a leafy tree, temporarily abandoning my own vehicle in the cafe parking lot because I lucidly recognized that I was not in safe psychological conditions to drive through dense urban traffic requiring concentrated attention and quick reflexes, currently severely compromised by paralyzing emotional shock. Mauricio's apartment perfectly reflected the lifestyle of a single programmer working remotely. Compact functional space, but chronically disorganized. Cutting-edge technological equipment, including multiple large monitors, expensive mechanical keyboard, professional ergonomic chair, drastically contrasting with the rest of the neglected environment, with piles of clean clothes, never properly folded, empty delivery packages accumulated in an overflowing trash can, dirty dishes stacked in the small sink of the American-style kitchen. The recommended cold shower was simultaneously physically invigorating, shocking the numbed nervous system back into a more alert state, and emotionally devastating, allowing the dam of repressed tears to finally break completely, while the icy water hammered against sensitized skin, convulsive sobs echoing against the white tiles of the tiny shower stall, muffling the anguished sounds of socially unacceptable, but humanly inevitable masculine suffering in the face of such deep, complete betrayal. Mauricio discreetly did not comment on my obviously red, swollen eyes when I emerged from the bathroom 27 minutes later, slightly loose borrowed jeans and a plain black polo shirt also borrowed. Simply silently offered a natural chicken sandwich purchased at a nearby bakery and a bottle of cold mineral water, which I obediently drank despite my stomach nauseously protesting against the introduction of solid food. Dr. Vicente Almeida's office was located on the 13th floor of an old but well-maintained commercial building near the central courthouse of the city. A busy area even on Saturday afternoon due to obsessive workaholic lawyers working on urgent cases that didn't respect the comfortable limits of traditional business hours. The absent receptionist had left the door unlocked with a handwritten note directing expected visitors directly to the private meeting room at the end of the corridor, illuminated by fluorescent lights flickering and needing maintenance for months. Apparently, Dr. Vicente was an impressive man with a commanding presence, despite his average stature, not particularly physically intimidating. Gleaming black skin under artificial lighting, impeccably trimmed, millimetrically precise graying mustache, white curly hair on the sides contrasting with the still predominantly dark top, deep, penetrating brown eyes that seemed to instantly catalog each emotional nuance, expressed through tense body language, defensive, protective posture. Mr. Rodrigo, Mr. Mauricio, I deeply appreciate your punctual attendance, despite the emotionally devastating circumstances that I imagine you are currently going through, based on the summarized description provided telephonically previously. He began with a deep professional voice, tempered by genuine compassion cultivated through decades of dealing with emotionally traumatized clients by cruel marital betrayals recently discovered. Before we begin the detailed legal consultation, I need to establish some basic parameters of absolute confidentiality and realistic expectations about subsequent legal procedures. Everything discussed here is protected by legally inviolable attorney-client privilege. I will be absolutely honest about statistical probabilities and procedural challenges instead of offering temporarily comforting but ultimately harmful false hopes. And my primary objective is to protect your legal, patrimonial, emotional interests, maximizing favorable results in the inevitable divorce process while minimizing unnecessary collateral damage. I agreed, appreciatively murmuring, sitting heavily in a comfortable upholstered chair strategically positioned in front of Dr. Vicente's organized desk covered with orderly stacks of legally complex cases, professionally framed diplomas decorating walls painted in a neutral light beige tone conveying professional seriousness without excessive alienating coldness. Mauricio sat supportively on my right side, the comforting, silent, but palpable presence of a loyal best friend willing to sacrifice his personal Saturday afternoon to offer practical emotional support during a devastating transformative crisis. Dr. Vicente, I sincerely thank you for making valuable personal time available during the weekend for an emergency consultation not properly scheduled with appropriate advance notice. I began formally trying to maintain minimal professional composure, despite the continuous inner emotional storm threatening to collapse the fragile facade of apparent control. I discovered today through a private investigator I hired that my wife Helena, of 15 years, is currently at a roadside motel with my younger brother, Daniel. A double betrayal that simultaneously violates conjugal trust and family fraternal bonds. And I need professional legal guidance on how to legally proceed protecting my rights before the inevitable confrontation when she returns tomorrow. Sunday night, pretending to be spiritually renewed from a fictional retreat, I methodically, chronologically narrated all relevant details from the suspicious phone conversation accidentally overheard. Thursday afternoon, emergency hiring of investigator Claudio. Friday morning, devastating confirmation of the betrayal through professional photographic surveillance, proving Helena and Daniel registered together at the specific motel using their real identities, apparently unconcerned about possible discovery. Dr. Vicente listened attentively, patiently, without interrupting, occasionally noting critical observations on a silent silver notebook, facial expression maintaining studied professional neutrality, although his deep brown eyes demonstrated authentic human compassion for the obvious suffering manifested through my occasionally emotionally failing broken voice. Mr. Rodrigo, I deeply regret the devastating pain you are currently going through. Conjugal betrayal would already be sufficiently traumatic in isolation, but simultaneous family betrayal adds layers of substantially complicating emotional and legal complexity. Dr. Vicente began after I finished my exhaustively detailed complete account. From a pragmatic legal standpoint, we have an extremely favorable, solid basis for litigious divorce proceedings, based on documentarily proven adultery through incontestable professional photographic evidence, especially considering the particularly serious nature of the betrayal involving a close family member, amplifying the cruelty of the conjugal violation beyond reasonable expectations of minimal ethical behavior. He strategically paused, allowing the information to penetrate through the dense emotional fog before methodically, educationally continuing. However, I need you to clearly understand the fundamental distinction between the emotional satisfaction of immediate public dramatic confrontation and intelligent legal strategy maximizing your future patrimonial legal interests. Although it's humanly understandable, tempting to drive to that motel right now to publicly humiliatingly confront both traitors, such impulsive action could substantially harm your legal position later, providing ammunition for Helena and Daniel to claim threatening aggressive behavior, justifying protective measures against you, ironically transforming the victim into a judicially perceived aggressor. His words frustratingly echoed similar advice from Mauricio minutes before. Irrefutable logic, contradicting each primitive visceral instinct screaming for immediate justice, proportional revenge to the cruelly inflicted pain. Are you suggesting that I simply do absolutely nothing besides silently documenting additional evidence, patiently waiting for the strategically optimal moment for controlled confrontation, minimizing legal risks? I asked, trying to suppress the corrosive bitterness, tinging each word forced through tensely, painfully clenched jaw. Not exactly passive inaction, but rather intelligently calculated strategic action. Dr. Vicente, gently, firmly, I strongly recommend that you allow Helena to return Sunday night, as originally planned. Do not immediately reveal knowledge about recently discovered betrayal. Behave as normally as possible for a few days, collecting additional evidence through investigator. Claudio documenting systematic behavioral pattern instead of potentially excusable isolated incident. Consult specialized accountant to completely evaluate joint patrimonial situation, identifying possible hidden assets. Open separate individual bank account, discreetly transferring half of joint funds, protecting financial resources before Helena can preventively empty them after discovering that you know about the betrayal. The list of recommended strategic actions seemed endless, overwhelming, for a brain minimally functioning through dense traumatic fog, but I lucidly recognized that experienced professional advice, based on decades dealing with similar cases, vastly outweighed potentially counterproductive immediate emotional impulses. And as for the inevitable eventual confrontation when I decide to reveal knowledge about the discovered betrayal, how do I proceed in a manner that protects my interests without compromising my legal position? I questioned pragmatically, trying to focus on controllable aspects instead of diving again into a downward spiral of unproductive obsessive thoughts. Doctor. Vicente smiled approvingly, appreciatively, like an experienced professor, recognizing an intelligent student absorbing difficult lessons quickly despite a severely compromised emotional state. When the strategically appropriate moment for formal confrontation arrives, probably within 1 to 2 weeks after collecting sufficient documentation and adequately protecting your patrimonial interests, I recommend doing it in a controlled environment, preferably with a witness present such as your friend Mauricio here. Maintaining calm composure no matter how provocative or defensive Helena may initially react, focusing on documented objective facts instead of inflamed emotional accusations, and immediately presenting divorce papers already previously prepared by me, demonstrating the irreversible seriousness of the decision rather than an empty negotiable threat. The specific detailed instructions provided a paradoxically comforting structure amid the overwhelming emotional chaos, offering a concrete path forward through the terrifying unknown territory of traumatic marital dissolution. And what about my brother, Daniel? Is there any legal action I can take against him, specifically for alienation of affection or some similar legal concept? I asked, with fragile hope of legally holding both traitors accountable beyond simply divorcing Helena. Dr. Vicente sighed, compassionately regretting having to disappoint understandable but legally unfeasible expectations. Unfortunately, alienation of affection is no longer legally recognized in contemporary Brazilian jurisdiction. Eliminated from legal codes decades ago as an outdated patriarchal concept, treating spouses as passive property instead of autonomous agents responsible for their own adult choices. However, he raised a finger, emphasizing an important mitigating point. Betrayal with a close family member can be considered an aggravating circumstance in a litigious divorce process, potentially influencing the patrimonial division favorably to you, and certainly negatively impacting judicial perception about Helena's moral character should she dispute related issues such as alimony if applicable. The consultation extended for 2 hours and 43 intense, exhaustive minutes, meticulously covering all practical legal emotional aspects of the imminent divorce process. Equitable versus proportional division of marital assets accumulated during 15 years of marriage. Possibility of alimony, considering that both spouses worked professionally, earning similar reasonable salaries. Strategies to minimize conflict, public humiliation, inevitable family embarrassment when the truth eventually emerged to the knowledge of relatives, close friends. Estimated costs of attorney fees, varying depending on litigation complexity, and Helena's willingness to negotiate amicably versus contesting acrimoniously. When I finally emerged from Dr. Vicente's office in the late Saturday afternoon with the low sun painting the urban sky in reddish-orange tones, cruelly contrasting with the dark, suffocating inner emotional storm, I felt simultaneously more pragmatically prepared and more emotionally devastated. The concrete reality of imminent divorce, dissolution of 15 years of supposedly happy shared History was becoming increasingly inescapable, inevitable, definitive, instead of a temporary nightmare from which I would eventually wake up, relieved, discovering everything was just a disturbing illusion created by a stressed, overloaded mind. Mauricio drove me back to my car, still abandoned in the cafe parking lot, now completely dark, closed for hours, repeatedly offering for me to spend the night at his apartment instead of returning alone to the empty marital home haunted by memories now contaminated, retroactively poisoned by knowledge of the prolonged betrayal secretly happening while I lived naively, happily ignorant. Rodrigo, seriously, man, you shouldn't be alone tonight in this vulnerable, unstable emotional state. You can come sleep on the sofa bed in my apartment. We'll watch distracting, idiotic movies, eat greasy delivery pizza, drink enough beer to temporarily numb the pain without overdoing it to the point of incapacitating hangover tomorrow, he insisted genuinely worriedly. But I needed to be alone, paradoxically. Needed to sit on that beige leather sofa where Helena and I watched series comfortably intertwined. Needed to lie on that matrimonial bed where we had made love hundreds of times during 15 years. Naively believing in mutual exclusivity, basic conjugal fidelity. Needed to confront ghosts haunting each familiar room now transformed into museum of dead relationship, existing only as empty shell of something I thought had been real but discovered too late was merely elaborate illusions sustained by systematic lies coordinated between unfaithful wife and traitorous brother. The house was dark, silent when I arrived around 9 o'clock Saturday night. Parking car in closed garage where Helena's vehicle normally occupied adjacent space, now conspicuously empty, reminding of her prolonged absence supposedly on spiritual retreat, when in reality she was 63 kilometers away in cheap motel. Repeatedly, passionately having sex with Daniel while I suffered alone, discovering complete amplitude of cruel, calculated, double betrayal. Lights remained intentionally off as I walked like a ghost through familiar rooms, automatically navigating memorized layout after 8 years living in this property we had bought, together excited planning. Long, happy future, eventually including children filling empty rooms with innocent laughter, comforting, chaotic noise of healthy growing family. I sat heavily on the beige leather sofa without turning on television or any distracting electronic device, remaining in absolute silent darkness, except for distant urban sounds filtered through closed windows, occasional barking of neighbor dogs, car engines passing on quiet, residential street, distant siren of ambulance or police vehicle attending someone's emergency whose crisis probably seemed monumentally important to them, just as my own seemed to completely consume my entire existence at this specific, devastating moment. Equals my mind spun obsessively, uncontrollably through torturous questions, impossible to satisfactorily answer without direct confrontation. When exactly did the forbidding affair between Helena and Daniel begin? Was it instant attraction, irresistible chemistry at first family meeting years ago, or did it develop gradually, progressively through repeated interactions during Sunday lunches, festive barbecues, numerous family gatherings? Who initiated first? Romantic sexual contact, Helena deliberately, calculatedly seducing Daniel, or Daniel persistently pursuing Helena until she finally yielded to inappropriate advances? How many times did they secretly, clandestinely meet over months or possibly years, while I naively, honestly worked at construction sites stupidly, believing both loved, respected me enough not to violate sacred bonds of marriage and family brotherhood? Where else did they meet, besides cheap roadside motels? In Daniel's apartment, divorced, living alone for 4 years, providing convenient privacy for prolonged illicit encounters without risk of interruption. In Helena's office, after hours, when employees had already left, leaving empty space available for inappropriate extramarital activities on examination table or waiting room sofa, awaiting innocent patients during normal workdays. The most disturbing, nauseating possibility, violently churned stomach. Had they met here in this sacred matrimonial house? In this bed, where I slept every night? On this sofa where I relaxed, watching television after exhausting days, coordinating complex projects? In this shower where I daily cleaned myself, unaware of potential contamination by violating presence of my wife's forbidden lover, invading private conjugal territory, transforming welcoming home into scene of devastating emotional crime? Disturbing mental images invaded consciousness relentlessly, cruelly. Helena and Daniel passionately kissing against hallway wall, frantically undressing in bedroom, leaving clothes scattered across polished wooden floor, having urgent violent sex in various positions throughout house, while I was miles away, innocently working, completely oblivious to betrayal, simultaneously happening in my own supposedly protected, sacred, inviolable domestic territory. Overwhelming nausea forced me to abruptly rise, staggering frantically to the bathroom where I violently vomited the minimal stomach contents reluctantly. Consumed during the afternoon a chicken sandwich, generously offered by Mauricio, now painfully expelled through convulsive abdominal muscle spasms, contracting uncontrollably, pathetically, humiliatingly, kneeling before the cold, white porcelain toilet, embracing its edge like a desperate castaway clinging to floating debris after a catastrophic shipwreck. I wept copiously, uncontrollably, for the first time completely since the devastating confirmation of betrayal through Claudio's phone call hours ago. That seemed simultaneously an infinite eternity and fleeting moments. Convulsive sobs echoed against the white tiles of the small bathroom, my entire body violently trembling not from physical cold, but from traumatic, emotional shock. Finally, manifesting physically after hours of forced repression necessary to function minimally during professional consultations with Claudio, Mauricio, and Dr. Vicenti. How long I remained kneeling in that pathetic position, I cannot precisely estimate. It could have been 15 minutes or 2 complete hours. Temporal perception severely distorted by an altered state of traumatized consciousness, functioning at an abnormal frequency, dissociated from measurable objective reality. Eventually, I managed to rise shakily, staggeringly, rinsing my mouth with ice-cold tap water multiple times, trying to remove the persistent sour, acidic taste of vomit stuck to my tongue and teeth, deliberately avoiding looking at my own reflection in the medicine cabinet mirror, knowing that the image returned would be of a shattered man, unrecognizable compared to the reasonably happy, confident person I had been just 36 hours ago before the suspicious telephone conversation, accidentally overheard Thursday afternoon, triggered an investigative avalanche, revealing devastating truths buried under thick layers of systematic, coordinated lies. I stumbled to the master bedroom, stopping hesitantly at the door, contemplating the king-size bed covered with a floral comforter that Helena had carefully chosen at an expensive department store 3 years ago, celebrating our 12-year wedding anniversary. Cheerful and excited about the decorative renewal of our shared intimate environment, that bed witnessed countless moments of conjugal intimacy over the years. Passionate sex in the early days of marriage when desire still burned intensely. Comfortable routine sex in the intermediate years, when familiarity replaced exciting novelty. Increasingly infrequent and spaced-out sex in the last year, which I naively attributed to mutual professional fatigue and accumulated stress, without suspecting that Helena's decline in interest reflected sexual satisfaction secretly obtained elsewhere with other partners, specifically my own blood brother. Would it ever be possible to sleep again in that bed without obsessively imagining Helena and Daniel occupying the same intimate space? Sweaty bodies intertwined, pleasurably moaning, while I honestly worked, believing naively in basic conjugal fidelity. The obviously negative answer inevitably determined that regardless of the eventual outcome of the divorce process, I would never manage to continue living in this house, haunted by contaminated memories, retroactively poisoned by knowledge of prolonged betrayal. Each familiar room now carried the potential of having witnessed illicit activities between unfaithful wife and traitorous brother. Each horizontal surface, sofa, table, bed, kitchen counter, could have served as a stage 4 clandestine sexual encounters, happening brazenly in my own domestic territory while I was absent, naively working. I gave up trying to sleep in the contaminated marital bed, returning to the living room sofa, where at least I maintained the fragile illusion that that specific piece of furniture perhaps remained in, not directly witnessing betrayal, although I rationally recognized that the entire house was irrevocably stained by the devastating discovery. I lay down fully dressed, still wearing the jeans and polo shirt borrowed from Mauricio, pulling the decorative wool blanket over my trembling body, not from cold but from persistent emotional shock, staring fixedly at the dark, invisible ceiling while my mind continued spinning frenetically through obsessive questions, torturous hypothetical scenarios, fantasized revenge plans never realistically executed. The cell phone vibrated insistently in my jeans pocket, awakening me from the unintentional, restless doze into which I had unconsciously slipped at some point. During the early morning, my exhausted body finally overriding my hyperactive, agitated mind. The bright screen showed 3:42 on Sunday morning. Deborah's nammy older sister by 4 years urgently flashing, indicating an incoming call at a socially absolutely inappropriate time, suggesting a serious family emergency justifying the disturbance of someone else's sleep during sacred hours of night rest. Sorry to call it this absurd hour, but I just received an extremely disturbing call from Mom saying that Daniel called, crying desperately half an hour ago, claiming that you're violently threatening him by phone, sending aggressive, intimidating messages, that you're acting completely out of your usual character, severely frightening her. Deborah fired rapidly as soon as I answered, voice loaded with concern and confusion about a situation obviously not completely understood. What the hell is happening between you two? Did you fight over some family business? Disagreement about future inheritance from parents? Something related to work or money? Lent not returned. Mum is absolutely terrified, thinking you'll get involved in a violent physical confrontation. You know how fragile her heart is after recent heart attacks? She can't handle unnecessary additional stress. Daniel's calculated manipulation already establishing an alternative narrative favorable to him, painting himself as a victim unjustly persecuted by a suddenly aggressive, irrational brother was simultaneously strategically impressive and morally revolting. He was proactively building a preventive defense, even before I had the opportunity to confront him directly, poisoning the perception of a vulnerable elderly mother and protective sister naturally inclined to believe the version presented first, especially coming from Daniel, always considered the younger charismatic charming son, needing family protection against the cruel hostile world. Deb, take a deep breath and listen to me with complete attention, because I'm going to tell you something devastating and shocking that will permanently and irreversibly change your perception of Daniel and Helena. I began with a surprisingly calm, controlled voice, considering the anger violently boiling beneath the seemingly serene surface. I haven't violently threatened Daniel nor sent even a single aggressive message yet, because I'm following professional legal guidance from a divorce lawyer consulted yesterday about how to proceed strategically. What's really happening is that I discovered through a private investigator hired Friday that Helena has been systematically cheating on me for an undetermined time with Daniel specifically. Both currently registered together in a roadside motel while she publicly claims to be at a fictional spiritual retreat organized by non-existent friends. Shocked silence filled the phone line for long, uncomfortable seconds, while Deborah processed the completely unexpected, devastating information, contradicting all expectations about the moral character of a professionally respected sister-in-law and beloved younger brother. Rodrigo, this is an extremely serious, grave accusation with catastrophic, devastating family implications, if true, but also potentially legally damaging, defamatory if based on a misunderstanding or insufficient circumstantial evidence. She finally responded with a trembling voice loaded with natural resistant disbelief, faced with such a disturbing revelation, contrary to comfortable narratives established during years of superficially harmonious family coexistence. I have incontestable high-resolution photographs captured by a professional private investigator, former police officer specialized in cases of marital infidelity, clearly, unequivocally showing Helena and Daniel entering the motel together Friday afternoon, registering using their real identities in room 20, remaining there for hours, while supposedly she was spiritually meditating, and he claimed to be working visiting potential real estate broker clients. I explained methodically, providing specific verifiable details, demonstrating this wasn't unfounded paranoia or frivolous accusation based on vague suspicions. I can send copies of the photographs irrefutably documenting betrayal if you need concrete visual evidence, beyond my word. As a brother who has never lied to you in 42 years of shared life. Another prolonged pause, while Deborah absorbed the inescapable reality, probably mentally reviewing years of family interactions, reinterpreting behaviors previously considered innocent through a new lens, revealing a prolonged secret affair happening unnoticed under the collective noses of an entire trusting, naive family. My God, Rodrigo. If this is true, and honestly, based on your tone of voice and specific details provided, primera belai, Beatriz, then Daniel and Helena are fundamentally different, morally corrupt people compared to who we thought we intimately knew for years. She murmured, stunned, while processing the full implications. What are you going to do now? Immediately. Violently confront both, When Helena returns tonight Sunday evening, or proceed through appropriate legal channels, divorcing yourself in a civilized manner without unnecessary public family drama. I briefly explained the legal strategy recommended by Dr. Vicente. Silent. Additional documentation during 1 to 2 weeks before formal controlled confrontation. Preventive protection of assets through a separate bank account. Complete preparation of litigious divorce documents before revealing knowledge about the discovered betrayal. Deborah reluctantly agreed that the intelligent strategic approach outweighed the emotional satisfaction of an immediate, impulsive, dramatic confrontation, immediately offering to help financially and emotionally during the inevitable difficult process, suggesting that I temporarily stay in the guest room of her apartment instead of remaining alone in the marital house haunted by retroactively poisoned, contaminated memories. And what about Mom? What do we tell her about Daniel's manipulative call, falsely painting himself as an unjustly persecuted victim? I asked pragmatically, recognizing the need to control the family narrative before Daniel could establish a distorted version of events as the collectively accepted truth. She's probably awake now, worried, distressed, waiting for the return of her call, confirming that I won't violently attack Daniel. Her fragile heart can't handle prolonged stress of incorrectly misunderstood family conflict. Deborah sighed, heavily audible through the cell phone, clearly pondering the complicated dilemma of how much to reveal to our elderly mother of delicate health without causing potentially dangerous shock, but also without allowing Daniel to continue manipulating family perception with impunity. Let me handle Mom for now. I'll call her shortly when the time is minimally appropriate after this absurd early morning. Vaguely explain that there is a serious misunderstanding between you and Daniel that will be resolved through civilized adult conversations without physical violence involved. Calm her sufficiently to avoid a stress-induced heart attack, but without revealing the complete sordid details about the discovered affair until the situation is more controlled and stable. She decided, assuming her usual family role of mediator and organizer during inevitable family crises. I sincerely, genuinely thanked her for the unconditional support offered without judgment or questioning the veracity of the devastating allegations presented. Recognizing the privilege of having a reliable, supportive older sister willing to believe my word without demanding photographic evidence before offering loyalty and support. Many men in similar situations faced additional family skepticism, accusations of unfounded jealousy, paranoia, social pressure to forgive, forget, reconcile, preserving superficial family unity at the cost of dignity and personal self-esteem, sacrificed on the altar of artificially falsified domestic harmony. The rest of Sunday, early morning, passed in a nebulous state of semi-consciousness, floating between restless, shallow naps and obsessive, anxious wake. Exhausted body, demanding rest that the agitated mind refused to fully allow. At 10:17 in the morning on Sunday, the cell phone vibrated again, displaying the name of Claudio, the private investigator who had confirmed the devastating betrayal through professional photographic surveillance just 24 hours ago, which simultaneously seemed like an infinite eternity and fleeting moments. Rodrigo, good morning. Considering the obviously bad circumstances, I'm sorry to disturb Sunday morning, but I have an urgent update about the monitored situation that you might consider relevant. Critical for your immediate knowledge, Claudio began professionally direct without unnecessary social preambles. Helena and Daniel left the motel approximately 30 minutes ago, saying goodbye prolongedly in the parking lot with passionate kiss-extended embraces, before entering separate vehicles, driving in opposite directions. Helena is currently on a direct route to your shared residence, estimated arrival time in approximately 57 minutes, considering relatively light Sunday traffic on main highways. The information caused a sudden spike of adrenaline through my nervous system, numbed by lack of adequate sleep. Heart racing erratically, while my mind quickly calculated practical implications. Helena would return in less than an hour, pretending to be spiritually renewed from a fictitious retreat, expecting to find a naive, trusting husband blindly believing elaborate lies, completely unaware that a devastating discovery had occurred during her prolonged absence. I would have to perform the role of uninformed, unsuspecting spouse maintaining normal, calm composure, while internally boiling with rage, betrayal, humiliation, each interaction being potentially psychological torture but strategically necessary to follow the professional legal guidance of Dr. Vicente. Thank you for the timely update, Claudio. Continue discreet monitoring of both targets during the next week, as originally contracted, photographically documenting all future meetings, establishing systematic behavioral pattern instead of isolated incident, potentially excusable as momentary error of judgment, influenced by alcohol, drugs, or temporary emotional crisis. I instructed trying to sound professional control despite slightly trembling voice betraying underlying unstable emotional state. 57 minutes. Less than an hour separated me from the most emotionally challenging confrontation of my entire adult life. Pretending marital normality before a treacherous wife, freshly arrived from a sexually active weekend with my own brother, smiling, hugging her, perhaps even casually kissing her, following habitual routine of reunion after temporary separations. Politely asking about fictitious spiritual retreat, patiently listening to elaborate lies, flowing naturally from lips that had passionately kissed. Daniel, just minutes ago in the motel parking lot, witnessed photographically documented by vigilant, discreet investigator. The necessary hypocrisy deeply repulsed every moral fiber of my being. But I lucidly recognized that following experience, professional legal advice vastly outweighed emotional satisfaction of immediate, dramatic confrontation potentially harmful to my future legal patrimonial interests. I forced myself to rise from the couch where I had spent a restless, sleepless night, stumbling to the bathroom for a quick, invigorating shower necessary to wash away cold sweat of anxiety accumulated during hours and present, minimally presentable, normal appearance instead of emotionally, physically shattered. Hot water cascading over tense body marginally helped relax defensively contracted muscles, although nothing could alleviate the suffocating tightness in my chest or permanent knot in my throat, making normal breathing, swallowing difficult. Shaving was a challenging, fine motor control exercise with intermittently trembling hands, resulting in small, superficial cuts, lightly bleeding, which I stanched with toilet paper, pressed against irritated, injured skin. Dressing casually in comfortable jeans and plain t-shirt, without flashy prints, completed superficial transformation from emotionally shattered man into external appearance of routine domestic normality expected on typical Sunday morning. I contemplated my own reflection in the bedroom mirror. Face visibly paler, thinner than just 2 days ago. Red, swollen eyes, betraying tearful, sleepless night. Expression lines seemingly prematurely deepened by extreme accumulated tension and mentally practiced casual, relaxed smile I would need to display when Helena crossed the entrance door, carrying travel bag and never-before-seen yoga mat, pretending to return from transformative spiritual self-discovery journey. The familiar engine sound of Helena's silver compact car entering shared garage arrived exactly 59 minutes after Claudio's informative call. Her punctuality ironically admirable, considering she was returning from extended weekend of systematic sexual betrayal instead of genuine professional commitment requiring precise timing. I breathed deeply multiple times, trying to calm uncontrollably accelerated heartbeat, nervously smoothing shirt over tense torso, casually positioning myself on living room couch with television remote in hand, as if watching any Sunday program instead of anxiously awaiting the entrance of unfaithful wife, returning from prolonged encounter with lover, who happened to be my own traitorous brother. The door connecting the garage to the kitchen opened with a familiar, comforting creak normally, but now loaded with sinister, threatening meaning, followed by the sound of a wheeled suitcase being dragged over cold porcelain tile flooring, and a female voice calling cheerfully, animatedly, "Honey, I'm home. Did you miss me during these 3 days of total technological disconnection? I can't wait to tell you everything about the incredible transformative experiences from the retreat. I met wonderful, inspiring people, participated in profound, revealing meditations. I feel completely renewed energetically." The fabricated enthusiasm in her voice while reporting elaborate lies flowing naturally without detectable hesitation would be impressive, admirable, in a different, less personally devastating context. Helena clearly possessed natural talent for perfectly calibrated dissimulation, deception, after months or possibly years of systematic practice. During the prolonged secret affair with Daniel, I forced myself to get up from the sofa, walking toward the kitchen where Helena was unloading her suitcase near the dining table. A wide, genuinely fake smile fixed on her tanned face, glowing post-sex, although she obviously attributed the radiant appearance to spiritual benefits of the fictional retreat rather than recent hours of vigorous sexual activity with her forbidden lover. "Hi, honey. Welcome back. I really missed you during this lonely weekend here by myself. I lied softly while briefly casually embracing her as expected ritually after temporary separations, forcing myself not to instinctively recoil from physical contact with a body that had been intimately touched by another man, specifically my own brother, just hours ago in a roadside motel located 63 kilometers away, irrefutably, photographically documented by a professional private investigator. Her perfume, an expensive floral fragrance I had given her on our last wedding anniversary, was subtly mixed with the masculine scent of cologne that I immediately unmistakably recognized as the specific brand habitually used by Daniel. Additional olfactory evidence of recent physical proximity between the two coordinated traders. The retreat was absolutely transcendental, transformative beyond all initial expectations I had, which were moderate, skeptical. Helena began animatedly, enthusiastically, while unpacking her suitcase, removing folded clothes. I noticed the conspicuous absence of the yoga mat previously mentioned as an item taken to the supposedly meditation and physical practices focused retreat. We participated in spiritual awakening ceremonies at dawn with harmonic mantric chants, deep self-knowledge workshops facilitated by experienced international visiting spiritual masters, holistic energetic therapy sessions, clearing emotional blockages accumulated through decades of limiting social conditioning. I literally feel like a new, renewed person ready to restart life with expanded perspective, elevated consciousness. The cruel irony of Helena talking about starting a new life while simultaneously systematically betraying the existing marriage wasn't lost on me, although I maintained an appropriate, neutral, interested facial expression of a supportive spouse supporting his partner's self-discovery journey. Every word coming out of her mouth was an elaborately, carefully constructed lie to cover up her actual weekend activities. Repeated sex in a cheap motel with my brother instead of meditation in a non-existent spiritual center. And she performed the role of enthusiastic retreat participant convincingly, naturally, without detectable signs of guilt, nervousness, anxiety that I naively expected to observe in a conscientious person committing such a profound, grave betrayal. It sounds like it was a really valuable, meaningful experience for you. I'm genuinely happy that you found time for spiritual self-care, considering how much professional stress you've been accumulating recently with your increasingly demanding office. I replied automatically, saying the socially expected appropriate words while my mind coldly calculated how many additional lies she would tell, elaborating the fiction of the non-existent spiritual retreat. Part of me, a small, morbid, masochistic part, wanted to hear every creatively invented detail, systematically cataloging the lies for eventual future confrontation when the strategically appropriate moment arrived. As advised by Dr. Vicente, the specialized attorney, consulted Saturday afternoon. The rest of Sunday passed in emotionally exhausting theatrical performance of domestic conjugal normality. Lunch prepared collaboratively in the kitchen, discussing trivialities about the approaching work week. Television series watched together on the couch, maintaining chaste physical distance between bodies instead of the habitual intimate entanglement of preceding years when I still naively believed in mutual fidelity and conjugal sexual exclusivity. Helena didn't seem to notice my subtle withdrawal or attributed it to accumulated fatigue from stressful professional projects that I vaguely mentioned periodically as convenient justification for any slightly atypical behavior deviating from established normal patterns. At night, when the inevitable moment arrived to lie in the shared matrimonial bed, I happily offered a convincing excuse of intense back pain. After a whole day reviewing projects in an inadequate posture, suggesting I would sleep in the guest room to not disturb her sleep with uncomfortable tossing during the early hours, Helena accepted the explanation without suspicious questioning, kissing me casually on the cheek before disappearing into the room that until 2 days ago I considered an inviolable conjugal sanctuary, but now saw as territory permanently contaminated by recently discovered betrayal. Lying alone on the narrow single bed in the rarely used guest room except when relatives occasionally visited, I contemplated the white ceiling illuminated by the orange light from the street lamp filtering through the thin curtain, methodically processing the plan I had begun to formulate during the preceding sleepless hours. Helena would turn 40 in exactly 4 weeks and 2 days, a date she had been planning to elaborately celebrate for months, with a large party gathering 120 guests, including close relatives, mutual friends, professional colleagues from her nutrition practice, various acquaintances accumulated during 15 years of marriage and 7 years managing her own successful business. The perfect irony, cruel, deliciously vindictive of the situation, did not escape my mind coldly calculating possibilities, while Helena and Daniel believed their sordid secret remained indefinitely. Protected by careful discretion and my presumed naivety, I would systematically document each subsequent illicit encounter through Claudio over the next 4 weeks, compile an irrefutable photographic dossier establishing an unequivocal behavioral pattern of prolonged systematic affair, and then at her own birthday party, surrounded by all important people in her personal and professional life, exposed the betrayal publicly and spectacularly in a manner that would guarantee humiliation proportional to the devastating pain cruelly inflicted on me through months or possibly years of elaborate coordinated lies. Claudio confirmed the technical feasibility of the plan when I called Monday morning explaining the audacious idea. "Rodrigo, it's absolutely possible to obtain the telephone number of the motel where Helena and Daniel registered. Call the reception requesting connection to the specific room during their next photographically documented encounter, and record the entire conversation through a specialized application previously installed on your cell phone. Recorded audio of unequivocal moans. Explicit intimate conversations between vocally identifiable lovers would be devastating evidence complementing the photographic documentation already extensively collected, creating an absolutely incontestable case of premeditated systematic adultery involving particularly serious double family betrayal." During subsequent weeks, I functioned on autopilot, schizophrenically divided between the public persona of seemingly unconcerned dedicated husband and the internal reality of a shattered man methodically planning elaborate revenge. I attended weekly consultations with Dr. Vicente, refining the legal strategy for contentious divorce that would be formally initiated immediately after the public exposure at the birthday party. I discreetly transferred exactly half of the joint bank funds to a new individual account, preventively opened to protect assets before Helena could retaliatively empty it. I systematically collected important financial documents, including property deeds, investment statements, income tax returns, digitally archived in remotely accessible cloud, in case Helena tried to destroy physical evidence in the future. I documented photographically 3 additional meetings of Helena and Daniel at the same motel during these 4 weeks. Wednesday afternoon, claiming urgent house call with a VIP patient. Saturday morning, pretending an extended yoga session at a new studio being tried. Tuesday night, inventing a professional dinner with a nutritional supplement supplier, discussing future business partnerships. Each elaborate lie flowed naturally from her lips without detectable hesitation. Each performance of a dedicated wife, returning from legitimate professional commitments, was executed convincingly, flawlessly, painfully reinforcing how deep systematic was her capacity for prolonged deceptive dissimulation without showing apparent guilt or disturbed moral conscience. The birthday party was meticulously planned by Helena for weeks with genuine, animated enthusiasm. Rented event hall elegantly decorated in gold and white tones. Sophisticated buffet serving an elaborate menu, developed collaboratively with a renowned chef known through nutritional professional circles. Carefully curated guest list including 120 significant people from her personal and professional life. Professional sound system hired to play a personalized playlist of her favorite songs accumulated over years. Ironically, cruelly, she invited Daniel naturally as a close family member expected at an important celebration, completely unaware that his presence would make the publicly humiliating exposure doubly devastating, impacting both traitors simultaneously. On the Saturday morning of the party, Claudio confirmed that Helena and Daniel had met again at the familiar motel from 9 to 13 hours. Hastily saying goodbye because Helena needed to return home to prepare for the birthday celebration starting at 19 hours sharp. "Rodrigo, I got the direct number of the motel reception and confirmed they accept external calls connecting guests in specific rooms upon appropriate request. During the party tonight, when the moment seems strategically optimal for maximum emotional impact, you can call requesting connection with room 27 claiming to be a family member needing urgent communication. If Helena and Daniel are there according to the established documented pattern, you will get live audio of their activities transmitted directly through the legally recordable phone line. But Helena and Daniel wouldn't be at the motel during the party. Obviously, both would be physically present at the event hall surrounded by 120 witnesses when the devastating public exposure occurred. However, I had elaborated an even more cruel, ingenious variation of the original plan. Claudio had bribed a motel employee to provide an audio recording of the most recent encounter that very morning, captured through an internal monitoring system discreetly installed in room 27 specifically after I paid 5,000 additional reais, ensuring ethically questionable but practically effective cooperation from the corrupt manager willing to compromise guests' privacy through appropriate financial compensation. The party started promptly at 19 hours, with Helena radiantly stunning wearing an elegant long golden dress that enhanced her figure meticulously maintained through rigorous diet and regular exercise, gracefully circulating among guests, receiving effusive compliments, warm hugs, generous gifts from people who genuinely appreciated her professionally and personally, completely unaware of the secret double life systematically maintained for months. Daniel arrived at 1932 wearing an impeccably cut charcoal gray suit, greeting me casually, naturally, as a familiar brother-in-law, instead of my wife's secret lover who had repeatedly penetrated her in a cheap motel just hours earlier. I strategically waited until 21 hours, when the party reached its peak of animation energy, with all 120 guests present gathered in the main hall. Music temporarily paused for the traditional birthday toast, celebrating Helena's 4 decades of life. I climbed onto the small stage setup for the DJ and musicians, requesting the microphone, claiming to want to make an emotional speech honoring my beloved wife on her significant milestone birthday. Helena smiled radiantly, emotional, anticipating appreciative romantic words that I traditionally pronounced on special occasions, celebrating our supposedly solid, happy relationship. Good evening to all present. I am immensely grateful for your attendance to celebrate Helena's 40th birthday, the woman who has shared 15 years of my life, supposedly building a marriage based on love, respect, and mutual fidelity. I began with a surprisingly calm and firm voice, considering my violently pounding heart and adrenaline flooding my nervous system. However, before we continue with the celebratory festivities, I need to share a recent discovery that has completely changed my perception about who Helena really is, beyond the impeccably maintained public and professional facade over all these years. A confused, uncomfortable silence gradually spread through the hall, as guests processed the unexpectedly serious and somber tone of a speech that had begun conventionally appropriate but quickly veered into unknown, disturbing territory. Helena looked at me with an expression mixing growing confusion and the first flash of panic beginning to manifest itself, while Daniel tried to discreetly move toward the side exit, instinctively sensing that something catastrophically wrong was about to inexorably happen. 4 weeks ago, I discovered through a professionally contracted private investigator that Helena has been systematically cheating on me for an undetermined amount of time, with my own younger brother Daniel here present, trying to cowardly escape. I continued, pointing at Daniel frozen mid-step toward the door now blocked by curious guests preventing his planned escape. I have photographically documented multiple meetings between them at a motel 63 kilometers away, where they register using their real identities in room 27 repeatedly during times when Helena claims to be in legitimate professional commitments, and Daniel is supposedly working visiting potential real estate clients. A growing shocked murmur rippled through the present crowd as Helena visibly and drastically paled under her carefully applied makeup. Daniel remained frozen, paralyzed, like an animal caught in the bright headlights of an inexorably approaching vehicle. But my words alone could be contested, discredited as paranoia or unfounded jealousy of an insecure husband imagining non-existent betrayals. So let me share irrefutable audiovisual evidence, professionally collected, documenting the systematic prolonged affair between my unfaithful wife and treacherous brother. I connected my cell phone to the professional sound system of the hall through a previously prepared auxiliary cable, playing the audio recording of their most recent encounter that very morning at the motel. Unmistakably feminine moans, instantly recognizable as Helena's voice, echoed amplified through the powerful speakers, filling the hall with explicit sounds of vigorous sexual activity, interspersed with intimate conversations and passionate whispers, where both lovers were vocally identifiable, casually discussing how many years they had been maintaining their secret affair under the nose of the idiot husband, too naive to suspect, laughing cruelly at the ease of systematically deceiving me through elaborately coordinated perfect lies. The collective reaction of 120 guests was simultaneously vindicatively gratifying and emotionally devastating. Shocked, horrified expressions spread like a wave through the crowd, some guests covering their mouths with incredulous hands, others averting embarrassed gazes from Helena and Daniel, now publicly and irrefutably exposed as family-betraying adults. My elderly 71-year-old mother dramatically fainted, requiring emergency medical intervention from guests who, coincidentally, included 2 doctors professionally obligated to assist. Deborah hugged me supportively and protectively, while tears streamed down her face, processing the double betrayal of her younger brother and sister-in-law, considered trusted close family. Helena tried to stammer incoherent explanations and pathetic excuses, but the words died in her throat, closed by overwhelming shame and absolute public humiliation. Daniel simply cowardly fled through the emergency exit, abandoning Helena to face alone the consequences of choices mutually made and coordinated during months of systematic secret affair. Guests began to uncomfortably quickly disperse, abandoning the party, transformed into a scene of devastating public exposure. Some murmuring solidarity and support for me, recognizing the betrayal unjustly suffered, others avoiding eye contact, embarrassed for having witnessed such a public, spectacular, humiliating matrimonial collapse. I left the party immediately after the exhibition concluded, heading directly to Deborah's apartment, where I had previously left a prepared suitcase containing essential belongings needed to start a new life, permanently separated from the marital home, now permanently associated with painful memories of devastatingly discovered betrayal. The contentious divorce process was formally initiated the following Monday, with Dr. Vicente filing a judicial petition based on documented adultery proven through irrefutable photographic and audiovisual evidence, requesting favorable asset division and immediate dissolution of marriage without possibility of negotiated reconciliation. Helena repeatedly tried to contact me through blocked phone calls, ignored WhatsApp messages, desperate emails, deleted without reading, allegedly claiming that the affair with Daniel had been a temporary mistake influenced by midlife crisis and accumulated professional stress, begging for an opportunity to explain non-existent mitigating circumstances. But there was no acceptable or justifiable explanation for months of systematic coordinated lies, double family betrayal, simultaneously violating conjugal trust and fraternal bonds, public humiliation inflicted through spectacular but necessary exposure to ensure that consequences were proportional to the gravity of calculatedly and cruelly committed violations. Daniel was essentially excommunicated from the family immediately. Mother refused to speak to him after recovering from her initial collapse. Deborah permanently blocked all his contacts. Close and distant relatives expressed collective disapproval, condemning morally reprehensible behavior, betraying simultaneously older brother and the sacred institution of marriage. Helena lost substantial clients from her nutrition practice after the story spread virally through social media and local gossip. Professional reputation irreparably tarnished by the spectacularly publicly exposed personal scandal. The divorce was finalized 6 months after the public exposure at the party, the judge ruling favorably to me regarding asset division, considering the aggravating circumstances of documentarily proven family adultery, granting me 60% of accumulated marital assets, including the house later sold with substantial profit divided, according to judicial determination. I did not request alimony from Helena, nor she from me, considering both professionally established, financially independent, without dependent children, complicating custody support issues. Today, 3 years after the transformative exposure, I have completely rebuilt my life. Moved to a different city, accepting a professional promotion as regional manager of a construction company expanding operations nationally. Met a wonderful woman named Beatrice through a dating app, being honest and transparent about my traumatic past since the first date, avoiding repeating mistakes of blind trust naively deposited. The relationship developed gradually and respectfully based on honest, transparent communication instead of naive assumptions about fidelity, guaranteed only by ceremonially pronounced matrimonial vows. I maintain no contact with Helena, Daniel, or anyone associated with that devastating but definitely closed chapter of my life. focusing energies on a promising future instead of obsessively ruminating about a painful past, impossible to retroactively alter. The public exposure at the party was cathartic and necessary not only for my emotional recovery but also to publicly demonstrate that calculated, systematic betrayals have proportional, inevitable, eventual consequences, no matter how long perpetrators believe they are, protected by careful discretion and presumed naivety of victims. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, justice, and rebuilding, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions in the comments below, reporting similar situations faced or observed. To hear the next story, click on the suggestion appearing on screen now. Thank you for watching, and always remember, systematically betrayed trust deserves exposure proportional to the deliberately and calculatedly inflicted cruelty.